Upon the death of our 82-year-old father-in-law, leaving us in mourning, my stepmother made an unexpected announcement. We were shocked and objected. How can you claim that his own son is an outsider? After all, hasn't my wife, Nancy, been the one taking care of Dad all along? Franklin protested vehemently. Standing with her daughter and son, my stepmother countered, "You're likely only looking after him for the inheritance, right?" It was so clear. Weren't you embarrassed? Poor people are truly contemptible. They began to criticize me collectively, and as Franklin's anger escalated, I quietly said something to soothe him before confronting them. "Fine, then we shall be strangers from this moment forward." Surprised by this, my stepmother and her children replied, "Well, isn't that just like the callous fortune seekers we suspected you were?" Becoming strangers is indeed a relief. They burst into derisive laughter. Their betrayal is something I'll never forget, recalling the way they treated both my father-in-law and myself. My name is Nancy, a 50-year-old homemaker. My husband, Sean, is 4 years my senior, and we've enjoyed a robust marriage of 22 years, blessed with 2 children. 11 years ago, as our youngest started elementary school, I contemplated a part-time job. However, my father-in-law suffered a stroke and needed care. I deeply cherished my amiable father-in-law, who reciprocated my affection. Sean says I remind him of his actual mother, his father's first wife, jesting, "So, I'm a mama's boy, huh? I am not your mother. Please put your dirty socks in the laundry basket." We would share a laugh over such exchanges. Yes, my current mother-in-law is indeed a stepmother, making no biological connection between Franklin and her children. My father-in-law was 71 and remarkably active, often playing golf with friends and Franklin, before his health declined. It was devastating to see him become bedridden. Our in-laws' residence was close by, and I assisted in his recovery whenever possible. Conversely, my mother-in-law and her siblings, living with us, showed minimal concern for my father-in-law, leaving his care primarily to me and the caregivers. For hospital visits, my stepmother casually assigned me, ignoring my other commitments. When I mentioned a scheduling conflict due to my son's parent-teacher meeting, she would disregard it, implying the urgency of my father-in-law's needs over mine, leaving me with no choice but to comply reluctantly. I escorted my father-in-law to the hospital early in the morning and managed to return by mid-afternoon, just in time for the parent-teacher meeting. Upon our arrival, I discovered my stepmother and her children indulging in a lavish, delivered lunch. They casually remarked, "Oh, you're back early. You should have devoted more time to rehabilitation. Did you actually visit the hospital?" Feeling a wave of anger, I maintained my composure, not wanting my father-in-law to feel responsible, and replied brightly, "Yes, we went as scheduled, right, Dad? You managed to walk 20 steps today, didn't you? It seems your left side is beginning to regain movement. I hope to see you out of this wheelchair soon. Even the doctor was astonished by your rapid improvement. Let's keep up the good work." Despite our exchange, my stepmother and her children showed no interest, continuing to feast and watch TV. Retreating to the room, I quietly inquired of my father-in-law, "Are they always like this?" Observing his sadness, he confessed, "Well, I wasn't much at home before. Before I realized, things had become like this." He sighed lightly. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law seemed unemployed, and even when questioned, Franklin admitted he knew nothing. Franklin's real mother died when he was 12. Being affluent, his father, my father-in-law, received numerous marriage proposals. However, he couldn't move past his late wife and was also worried about Franklin, who was experiencing a difficult time. Consequently, he delayed remarrying. Eventually, when Franklin graduated from college and moved out at 27, my father-in-law felt it was time and remarried his current wife. At that time, he was 57, and the new wife was 42, with 2 children, which raised eyebrows among acquaintances. Since Franklin no longer resided at home and no one objected strongly, the 3 started living in my father-in-law's house. Therefore, Franklin never cohabited with his stepmother and half-siblings and barely knew them, leaving me to navigate our relationship tentatively. Initially, I was merely expected to assist with my father-in-law's rehabilitation. However, over time, my stepmother and her children began to impose additional tasks on me. If you're taking him for a walk in his wheelchair, could you also shop along the way? The garden is overgrown. Please tend to the weeding. Gradually, these demands escalated, and recently, they even asked me to prepare meals. It seems no hired help stays for long, likely due to their harsh treatment. They probably think, since she does it for free, why not? When I even mildly resist, they threaten, then you can no longer stay in this house. Don't you want to contribute to your father-in-law's rehabilitation? Truthfully, if their care were left to them, my father-in-law would never walk again. Moreover, there was a noticeable neglect when I was absent. He was left in diapers as they refused to assist him with toileting. Furthermore, when I inquired about his meals, my father-in-law often reported being given only commercial liquid food, and sometimes they neglected to feed him altogether. Even when I prepared suitable meals in advance, I would find them untouched the following day, indicating a complete neglect of care. It would be understandable if they were preoccupied with work, but there was no indication of any employment. I wondered who they thought was supporting their lifestyle. Despite my frustration, I continued to assist with meals while my children were at tutoring, and I asked Franklin to supervise them. They adored their grandfather and would assist in his care on certain days. Thanks to our efforts, my father-in-law made considerable progress, regaining the ability to use the bathroom independently and reclaiming some of his autonomy. When he was able to stand and walk by himself, he gave a thumbs up and tearfully expressed his gratitude, saying, "Nancy, we did it. Thank you, thank you. I don't know what would have happened without you." I was deeply moved and shed tears as well. The doctor emphasized that starting rehabilitation early was crucial to his improvement. I was relieved that I had persisted, but I remained cautious, continuing my visits to the family home, joining him for walks, and keeping a watchful eye. Upon my regular visits, the stepmother and her children would demand additional chores. "After you finish with your father-in-law, please do the dishes. Oh, and take these clothes to the dry cleaners. Could you also mail this package?" Though they would overload me with tasks, I silently complied, fearing eviction. Then, my sister-in-law would sarcastically comment, "It's impressive how you butter up for an inheritance. Keep trying hard." Realizing their perception of me, my anger surged, and I avoided the family home for 3 days. Upon my return, I found my father-in-law back in diapers, lying in bed. I questioned the stepmother about what had occurred, and she nonchalantly replied, "Oh, he had a little fall. It's too complicated. You should take him to the hospital. If you were here, this wouldn't have happened." She blamed me entirely for the incident. Despite my outrage at their disrespectful attitude, I had to suppress my feelings to safeguard my father-in-law. I managed my emotions and continued my visits, ensuring his well-being. Fortunately, he quickly bounced back, regaining nearly full walking independence without needing a cane. Although he couldn't return to his previous level of golf, he enjoyed playing putt-putt golf and gate ball, engaging in social activities at clubs and re-establishing connections with old friends through outings and dinners. Regular checkups and rehabilitation remained essential. I was with him during those times. One day, in the hospital courtyard, after my father-in-law had narrowly escaped death, he shared with me how he now valued time and the importance of friends more than before. He admitted feeling happier than ever and gave me a profoundly noble smile. Seeing his smile, I felt as though all my hardships had been rewarded, and I couldn't help but cry. It was a lesson in the depth of human emotion. Then, on his 80th birthday, my father-in-law suffered a second stroke and passed away. I was the one who found him, not the cohabiting stepmother or step-siblings, but me, who had come to visit. Despite being in the house, it seemed they hadn't noticed his loss of consciousness. The doctor said if he had been found a little earlier, there might have been a chance. The only consolation for me was that my father-in-law's face was peaceful as he lay on the wicker chair with his eyes closed. As my husband, Franklin, and I grieved in front of his body in the hospital bed, my stepmother stated, "Strangers don't need to come to the funeral." We were shocked, and Franklin asked, "How can you say his own son is a stranger?" She firmly responded, "Well, You and I aren't blood related, so to me, you're a stranger. We were speechless. Franklin angrily retorted, even so, it's ridiculous not to attend the funeral. Wasn't it my wife, Nancy, who cared for Dad all this time? My stepmother, with her children behind her, began to badmouth me, accusing me of caring for him only for the inheritance. As Franklin turned red with anger, I whispered something to calm him down and then told them, understood, then we are strangers. My stepmother and her children, taken aback, said, well, aren't you understanding, just like the heartless inheritance hunters we thought you were. It's refreshing to become strangers. And they laughed loudly. Franklin and I spent a long time paying our respects to my father-in-law's cleansed body, escorted it to the morgue, and said our final goodbyes. My stepmother and her children didn't even look at my father-in-law's body, but were chatting on a hospital bench. I overheard the brother saying, if there's 3 million, Mom gets 1.5 million, and we get 750,000 each. Even from a distance, as we silently walked past to leave, they shouted, don't ever show your face here again, you're strangers now. Franklin and I left the hospital without looking back, unaware they were cheerfully discussing how to spend the inheritance. The funeral for my father-in-law proceeded without us. Hoping he made it to heaven, the next day, I received a call from my stepmother, which I ignored, knowing what she would likely want. The following day, I saw 33 missed calls. The voicemails ranged from cajoling, Nancy, please, we need to talk, to threatening, enough is enough, you don't think you're something special? Answer the phone. I saved these messages and reported them to the lawyer. I had consulted the lawyer the day before yesterday, and my father-in-law's will had been revealed. According to the will, all the property was to be left to Franklin, the main beneficiary. All the inheritance was designated for Franklin and me. During his lifetime, my father-in-law had discussed this with me. I tried to refuse, citing I wasn't in it for the money, and it would leave your current wife and her children with nothing. However, he shook his head and explained, when I married my current wife, I wanted to help her, a woman with young children. But now, I think they've just taken advantage of my kindness, only to deplete my fortune. The children are 42 now, perhaps it's too late for change, but they've lived in luxury long enough. It's time they stood on their own. Above all, I don't want to leave them my fortune. I want it used by you, Franklin, and your children. That's my wish. He calmly convinced me with his earnest feelings. I had mentioned that I would discuss it with Franklin, but he had just been appointed to an executive position and was very busy. Before we could have a proper conversation, my father-in-law declared, I've already made the will, and then he passed away. I really wanted to attend my father-in-law's funeral, but the thought of a funeral orchestrated by my stepmother and her children was unbearable. I believed that attending or not attending the funeral wouldn't erase the relationship I had with my father-in-law. Because I didn't answer the phone, my stepmother, accompanied by her children, came to our house. In front of our children, my sister-in-law shouted at me, calling me, you greedy old hag, and my brother-in-law accused me of manipulating the situation. I quickly sent the kids upstairs. My stepmother appeared disheveled, a far cry from her usual self, with unkempt hair and dark circles under her eyes, resembling an old witch. Franklin stepped in front of me to protect me and sternly told them, enough, all of you. My stepmother, with bloodshot eyes, yelled, shut up. I don't know you. It's all because of this woman. Franklin faced her without flinching, stating, Nancy took great care of him. You guys did nothing for Dad. Then, my sister-in-law said, actually, it's your fault he lived longer because you cared for him unnecessarily. Franklin and I were speechless at her words. Neither my stepmother nor my brother-in-law denied it, instead saying, exactly, you did necessary things despite all the trouble we gave you. You kept coming back. Eventually, my stepmother blurted out the truth. After all, I married such an old man just for his fortune. Hearing this confirmed our worst suspicions about the kind of people they were, making us want to block our ears. They deserved to face the consequences for taking everything for granted. I pulled out a voice recorder from my pocket. I've documented this conversation and will forward it to my attorney. It will be challenging for you to prevail in any legal battle over the inheritance with these remarks. They were caught off guard by my unforeseen defense, labeling me a conniving fox. Despite their comments, I was determined to fulfill my father-in-law's final wishes. When my step-siblings shifted their approach, expressing, "Hey, we're genuinely sorry if you're upset," with my sister-in-law feigning regret and my brother-in-law making a tearful appeal, claiming, "We just don't know how to proceed. We've always depended on our father, and this ordeal is overwhelming." Sean regarded them with an icy stare and responded, "After everything disrespectful you've done, you think it can be resolved this simply? Moreover, your inability to be independent at your age is not our father's fault, but your own." They were left speechless, trembling, and seeking refuge behind my stepmother, who, with trembling lips, pleaded, "What are we supposed to do now? If you take the house, we'll be left homeless." They continued to lament their financial burdens due to various expenditures, questioning, "How will I afford my car?" I replied composedly, "That's the consequence of choosing to live beyond your means. You had sufficient for necessities. The situation is of your own making." Overcome by my rebuttal, my stepmother fell to her knees, begging, "Please, share a portion of the inheritance. Even a small amount would help." Franklin and I exchanged glances and resolutely declared, "There is no inheritance to divide with strangers." They looked at us in complete despair. Then, Franklin, prepared to dial the police on his phone, warned, "If you don't leave now, we'll have to report this as a home invasion by strangers." They left hastily in fear. We then relocated to prevent them from finding us again, particularly since our younger child's new high school was located far away. Relatives later informed us that they were evicted from the family home and now reside in a rundown wooden apartment, burdened by constant loan repayments. My 67-year-old stepmother, who had never shown concern for others, now continuously warns her children, "If you don't look after me, you'll end up regretting it." Despite being aware of their lack of filial devotion and living in fear of neglect herself, this appears to be their karma. We invested the 3 million yen inheritance into savings and asset investments, planning for our children's education and our retirement, while maintaining our standard of living. Experiencing the fallout from my in-laws' lavishness and remembering my father-in-law's honorable demeanor has taught me that aging can indeed be graceful and that wisdom is the most valuable legacy he left me.